David 2 Central.
Go ahead, David, too.
Can you show me 1041 and put me out on a detail patrolling for recruits?
10-4, I'll sign you out.
Welcome to another edition of Patrolling for Recruits. I'll be your host, Detective Sergeant Chris Haglin with the Holland Department of Public Safety, and today we'll be talking with Sergeant John Weatherwax, who is the Community Policing Sergeant for the Holland Department of Public Safety. So welcome, John.
Good to be here, Chris.
So let's start off. What does community policing mean to you and to your team?
Well, I think to speak in broad terms, it's based on building positive relationships between the police department and the community. So it's a philosophy of policing where we really work together with the community in creative ways, using creative problem solving. We really focus on the quality of life of the city residents and visitors and beyond. We really look at, what are the conditions, the current conditions of the neighborhood, and see how we can improve that. Whether it means working with BPW to repair street lights or organize community events. We really want to just focus on developing relationships within the community to improve the overall quality of life.
So why do you think, I'm involved in our recruiting team, obviously, but a lot of people want to be involved in community policing. Why do you think that is?
I really think that community policing has been pushed for 20 years plus, really. And I think that it's a movement now that's growing again, I would say, because of what's happened in law enforcement over the last, 3 to 5 years. It kind of took a dip in as far as the popularity of coming into law enforcement. But I really see that growing, and I think community policing is playing a role in that because of the relationship that we get to have with the community that, say, a regular patrolman might not be able to have. What I mean by that is we've got the ability to take the time and the extra resources and really develop into an individual or into a family, or we can come alongside an organization that's really helping out families or maybe helping out other organizations or community. So we can really invest time and commitment to people at an individual level, but a family level and a little bit more beyond. So we've got a little bit more time because we're not always responding to the 911 calls. We're not as tied down to that radio and to a dispatch center like a regular road patrol officer is. So we've got the ability to really invest in our community in that and really build those relationships in a positive way.
That's great. And you're a community policing sergeant, so you have a team of officers that work for you. Can you describe to our listeners kind of what your team looks like?
Yeah, for sure. So the city of Holland is divided up into 4 different regional areas, and I have a community police officer for each of those areas. Beyond that, we have 2 school resource officers, 1 permanent or full-time school resource officer for the high school and 1 for the middle school. And then we have a crisis intervention officer, and that officer works with our local community mental health, and they have got a clinician riding with them full-time. So they do a co-response model that was based out of Memphis, Tennessee years ago, but we've taken on that model for the last 2 years now. So they have a co-response to primarily mental health events. So we have 8 people with me included in that on our team. We have a really broad focus, and we can really respond to a variety of different events and calls and what have you.
So for the recruits out there that are listening that want to come and work for you, what would you tell them a typical day for a community policing officer looks like?
That's a very hard question to answer because much like a road patrol officer that's responded to a radio would have a difficult time answering that, it's a little bit similar in the way that we would respond. However, some of the typical things that we make sure to add to our day is just community contacts. So in most of our regional areas, our community officers have a school, typically an elementary school that's assigned to them. They have several apartment complexes or just a residential community that they are going to make contacts with. That might not be every day, but certainly within a week, they're going to be stopping by these areas and just connecting with the apartment managers, maybe a few of the residents, and definitely within their schools, they're going to be stopping by several times a week to contact the principal and other staff members, but also to spend some time on the playground and interact with the kids as well to start that positive relationship with law enforcement at an early age.
So you talked about your community policing officers, they do events and things of that nature. I want to ask you a personal question. In your 13 years as a community policing officer, what's an event that you really felt drawn to, something that impacted your career?
That's a difficult question. And I think that to change your question a little bit, I don't think I have an event. What I have over 20 years, and like you said, 13 of that being in community policing, what's been really important to me and really, frankly, special is the developing relationships. So over my career, I can, pick out a handful of the relationships that I've been able to build and really through community policing and having the ability and the time and resources to build that relationship more at an intimate level that I can look at over my 20 years and I can see how I've had an impact on their life. Whether, there's been a couple teenagers that when I came into their life through maybe I called a 911, that I came in at a pivotal moment where I was really able to have an impact. And because of that time and effort that I was able to put into them, we developed a relationship that we've been able to stay in contact over the years. So that's been really special to me. And I've got a number of those relationships, whether it's, at a teenage critical moment in their life or, they were an adult in a pivotal moment as well, that I was really able to come in and make an impact in their life. And community policing has really allowed me and other officers in the same situation to have the time to really devote to that relationship.
That's awesome. And what do you think are some of the, like, as the sergeant of this team, what are some character traits that help a community policing officer be successful in developing relationships within the community?
Empathy for sure, and compassion. And I think it really helps people thinking about those two things to really think outside of themselves and put themselves in another person's shoes because, it's easy for us to be on the outside of what somebody is going through and looking at it and say, oh, they just need to be doing this and this and this. But to actually put ourselves in their shoes and to walk alongside them and to see that, on the outside looking in, it might be easy for us to see what the answer is. But for them actually going through it, that what seems like an obvious answer to us would not be very obvious. And it's going to be much more difficult for them to accomplish. So being able to put ourselves in their shoes with the empathy and compassion, and then identifying the proper resources for them. Like, I'm not an expert in a lot of things, but I know who the experts are. So that's really important for the officers to know who the local organizations are that can really help people and come alongside people in a better way than even we can.
And that leads right into my next question that I was going to ask you is, what programs does your community policing unit offer to members of the community?
A little bit different than kind of what I was alluding to in the last question, but I'll get to that. A lot of the things that we offer just community-wide. We have our school resource officers, I mentioned that. We have a high school and a middle school resource officer. We run a Citizens Police Academy, and that typically starts in September and goes into the first week of November. And that gives people a very broad view of criminal justice in Ottawa County. So we really focus on Holland Department of Public Safety and our policing efforts, but we also bring in some county employees from the courts and from probation to really give people a broad perspective of criminal justice within Ottawa County. We also run a junior police academy, and that's focused around middle school students. That runs in 3 weeks every summer from mid-July into the first week of August. We have our Polar Patrol, if you're familiar with that, our ice cream truck, and that typically runs the first Monday after Tulip Time to September 30th, and that's open to any public events, and there's an application process for that if you want to inquire about that on our website. A little bit more importantly, or a little bit more serious note, we run a CRAZE program, which is a citizen response to active shooter events. That's a certification process that the community policing team has gone through to become instructors. And Holland Department of Public Safety and the Ottawa County Sheriff's Department, we run the same program because we think it's really important that law enforcement in our community have the same response to active attacks or active shooter events. So that's something that through the community policing team, that organizations or offices or businesses can request that kind of training to come into their location and get trained. We do CLEAR, and that's teaming up with MDOC for prisoner reentry to really help men and women that are transitioning out of prison and back in society have that tradition happen very very well and hopefully seamlessly, being able to interact with the law enforcement community again in a positive way. I mentioned our crisis intervention team. We have an ongoing relationship with community mental health. That's also teamed up a little bit with the Ottawa County Sheriff's Department. And then beyond that, we're continually teaming up with other area organizations and businesses. And a part of that is what I was alluding to earlier with really being able to help people that might be in need in an unfamiliar way to us, but Community Action House, Gateway Mission, Hope College, and many other organizations and businesses in the Holland community, even in and outside of the city, that we're really team up with on a regular basis.
And you just spit out a lot of information there. And so just for the listeners, where can they go to find these options and different programs if they wanted to get more information, or let's say they're interested in signing up for the Citizens Police Academy?
Yep.
How do they find more information on that?
A little bit of an obvious answer, but on our website, hollandpd.com, and at the top of that website, you'll see a drop-down menu called Community Programs, and then you can right there click on Community Policing Team. You'll see all of our team members and get an idea where they work, but all of the programs I mentioned, they are listed underneath Community Programs or Community Policing.
Nice, thank you. And when these officers are coming to your team, are they required to go through any additional training?
Not necessarily. I mean, they really are. I guess basically it's on-the-job training. Typically, somebody that comes into community policing have at least 2 to 3 years of general police service, so they already know how to be a cop per se. But at the same time, we really focus on them at a team level, so their peers come alongside of them and kind of guide them into transitioning to the community policing model and being able to spend more time with individuals and help them with the creative problem solving, whether it's, there's loud music coming from a neighboring house that's waking them up consistently, or it's a little bit more egregious. Maybe there's a domestic assault that community policing can, instead of just going in there and responding to the call traditionally, they can spend more time with the victim of an assault and help them get in contact with the right resources, whether it's Resilience or another community organization.
Nice. And once again, we're here with Sergeant Weatherwax, who is the Community Policing Sergeant with the Holland Department of Public Safety. And we're really focusing in on community policing today. The next question I have for you is, you've been a police officer for a pretty long time now. And I'm wondering, is it more difficult to be a community policing officer now or back when you started 20 years ago?
All right. I don't think it's easier one time or the other. I think they both have their difficulties. And what I mean by that, early in my career, our community policing philosophy was based more on the individual. So as a community policing team, we were more going into neighborhoods, knocking on doors, getting to know more of the individual, which is very important still today. I think our focus now in these modern days in community policing, we're more focused on large-scale events. We really want to create more of a feeling around law enforcement to promote the positive relationships and garnering the respect and just that overall positive feeling that we want from the community. We want the community as a whole to look positively towards our department. And I think in law enforcement, that's a goal of a lot of different agencies. So that's been more of our focus, to both host and participate in more large-scale events. And part of that is, at the individual level, years ago, we're able to develop that personal and intimate relationship. At the large-scale level, that we're able to connect with a lot more people in a larger scale, right? They're both equally important. Our focus has shifted a little bit, but what we really try to do here in Holland is create a balance. So I really promote our community officers to still make time for that intimate connection, but also make sure that they're available in, planning and organizing large-scale events as well.
You hit that one on the head, because my next question was going to try to put you on the spot to ask you which one is more effective, but you did the balancing thing, so I appreciate you getting ahead of me on that. Last question for you. What advice would you give to a potential recruit who is just getting ready to go into their law enforcement career?
All right. As we take on new officers that are pretty young, and and our recruiting efforts have stepped up recently. I've thought about this a little bit, and I really think it's important for young individuals coming into law enforcement to really be open to think outside of the box for problem solving. We do that tremendous amount in community policing because there's traditional ways to go about problem solving, and that everybody kind of knows that. But in community policing, we want to make sure that we are thinking outside of the box and coming up with new and innovative ways to solve everyday problems, right? The other thing, though, as a young person, you've got knowledge and experiences that older officers don't have. You've been through different things in your life that might be brand new experiences to other officers that you're now peers with in some way. I just want to encourage them to use those ideas and don't take them for granted. You're in this space now as a brand new officer for a reason, and you deserve to be there. So don't ever be afraid to share your thoughts and ideas, even when it's uncomfortable to do so.
That's great advice. And once again, thank you,
Absolutely.
Sergeant Weatherwax, for coming in and talking about community policing, and lots of resources available for you on our website, which is where you found this podcast. So make sure you're reaching out and getting involved. And thank you very much.
I appreciate it, Chris. Thank you.
David 2 is signing off. I'll be 1042.